Hey, welcome to the New Home Insights podcast by John Burns Real Estate Consulting. I'm Dean Worley, your host. Each episode, we're going to bring you some of the best minds in the housing business talking about some fascinating topics or trend or innovation or issue, just like the one you're about to listen to. Enjoy. Welcome to New Home Insights, the John Burns Real Estate Consulting podcast about everything about the U.S. housing market. I'm your host, Dean Worley. Today, we're going to tackle another topic that's a little bit outside of our normal housing purview, not so much, which we're doing a little bit more lately, which I love. It certainly, though, has impacts on builders and has impacts particularly on the equity investor side of the housing sector. Today, we're going to talk about ESG. That's environmental, social, and governance. It's basically this idea that accounting for the social aspects and impacts of investment activity rather than just accounting for that in terms of financial factors. So think things like sustainability or social responsibility or best labor practices, transparency, things like that. It's a massive movement, bigger than I realized it was, and it's becoming a critical part of the investment world. To help us do that, we have Alan Hubbell and Shawn Hunter. They're both with DuPont. That's the Fortune 500 company you've for sure heard about, but you probably think of them as purely a chemical company. They actually make a lot of products that touch the housing space. Alan leads DuPont's residential marketing team, and Shawn is DuPont's global sustainability director. Alan and Shawn, how you guys doing?
Hey, we're doing good, Dean.
Doing excellent, Dean. Really appreciate the opportunity, and hello to everybody listening.
I appreciate you guys coming on. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. We've had some technical issues, as you know, in the back, but this is a huge topic that is, I think, is fascinating. Beyond even housing. I like doing these. So let's first start with this. How about you guys just give us a quick little intro that's better than mine about what you do, who you are, what you do for DuPont, and then we'll get moving. Shawn, why don't you go first?
Yeah, sounds great. So thanks again, Dean. Really looking forward to today's discussion. So I'm Shawn Hunter. I have the awesome responsibility of leading sustainability for our shelter solutions business within DuPont, which is our building and construction focused business unit. What that means is that I'm responsible for setting the vision, the strategy for sustainability for the business, ensuring that that's integrated with the overall business strategy, and then working with my fellow leaders and really across the business to drive progress against those goals, that vision. As part of that, I also have the great privilege of leading a small and mighty product stewardship team, which is a team of some very passionate and talented individuals that ensure that we deliver our commitment to product safety, product sustainability as well. So a lot of exciting things that I get to do here in DuPont.
Alan, how about you?
Yeah, Dean. Yeah, same here. Thanks so much for having us join. We really appreciate it. I've been with DuPont over 30 years. As you said, I lead the residential marketing team for the performance building solutions business. So those are products like brand names like Styrofoam, Tyvek, as well as Froth Pack and Great Stuff Pro. And so I get involved in marketing strategy. I get involved in digital marketing, communications efforts. I work with our communications team. And I've been doing this for over 15 years in the business. Prior to that, I spent 10 years in sales, selling into the glass industry. So if you want to talk glass, I can do that as well. But 25 plus years into building products. So I know the space fairly well. And like as Shawn said, really excited to talk about ESG and sustainability today. It is a hot topic. It's getting a ton of interest, growing interest. And, we're all getting up the learning curve very fast. And so it should be a really good discussion.
Shawn, I'll have you talk to us about ESG a little more formally in just 1 second. But first, I wanted to touch on, Alan, you kind of touched on it just a second ago with Tyvek and Styrofoam. But what are some of the housing products that you guys do, and how much of a part of the housing building process are they?
Yeah, so we basically make, the technical term would be air, water, and thermal control layers. We're managing air, water, and thermal energy, right, transfer around primarily the building envelope. And so that can take the form of wraps, like a Tyvek, a mechanical wrap. You wrap around the house, fasten it. You would seal it with tapes and flashings to get a nice tight home. You'd be managing water as well, because water obviously causes, durability issues, right? Yeah. Rot and, You don't want water to get where it's not supposed to. And then the thermal. Then we have, whether it's below grade or above grade, a product like styrofoam. We also have a polyisocyanurate insulation, but that's going to manage your thermal losses across the building envelope. So anything that are primarily building envelope. We also have some spray foam products that you would, seal openings to help prevent air infiltration, which of course is energy as well as moisture infiltration. So air, water, thermal is really where we play.
So almost the skin of the house.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Dean, I would add to that kind of from the overall shelter business perspective. We have sort of another half of the business that deals on the interior side, sort of Corian design business, really focused on providing decorative surface solutions. And so, you can think about your Corian countertops, your Corian sinks that I'm sure many listeners have. And wanted to mention that because a lot of the things that we'll talk about today, we're seeing the same thing on that part of the business as we are on the envelope side. The increase in ESG, folks looking for climate, circularity, chemical solutions. So, we've got a good perspective from a couple of different points of view.
Okay.
Hey, Dean, one analogy. So
Sure.
you mentioned skin, and one analogy, a picture I'd get in your listeners' heads is more of maybe a windbreaker with a sweater, either underneath or on the top. So maybe like a ski jacket, right?
Okay.
For keeping air, water, and keeping you warm.
But not a sweater vest, because I don't get that. You don't worry about your shoulders and arms have to be cold. I don't understand sweater vest.
I don't own a sweater vest, but it's a good point.
I have never owned a sweater vest, I'm happy to say. So let's talk about my rough take on ESG. Shawn, do a better job of telling the folks at home, what is the whole concept of ESG?
Yeah, this is such a great question, Dean, because I think there are a lot of perspectives of what ESG means, and you kind of hear about it here and there, and it's really important, I think, to differentiate between ESG and just sustainability overall. I think you actually did a great job teeing up ESG because you mentioned sort of the investor focus, and ESG itself certainly has gained traction as a term and concept in the investment community. So at its heart, ESG itself is really about providing risk information to investors, right? It's about disclosure. It's about transparency. And, with that information, investors can take that and, make the decisions that they want based on that info. I recently heard just a clear statement, which was ESG is about transparency, not judgment. And I think that's a good segue over into the sustainability side, because when I think about sustainability is kind of more about judgment in the sense that the overarching question is, are we doing enough collectively as a society to address our big sustainability problems? And as a business, how do we do our part to help solve those big problems? So it's kind of the spectrum. And if I think about what we do in DuPont here, certainly it starts with that latter focus on, what are our beliefs around sustainability? In our business, we basically have beliefs that say, we know we're not sustainable today. We know we need to do something about it, and we've chosen to help lead the way. So, kind of putting all that together, if I think about ESG, I actually do start with kind of the bigger, what matters most to us all perspective. And, if you think about climate, right, it's what do we need to do to actually manage climate crisis in the right way? An important part of that whole journey, of course, is the investment discussion, and ESG, of course, the disclosures are an important part of what we need to consider as we seek to get on a more sustainable path.
How about the governance part? That that covers the environmental, the social a little bit. The governance part is more about labor practices, right? Tesla, we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but Tesla got in a little bit of trouble with some ESG folks with that recently. But what is the governance part?
Yeah, the Tesla's a fun one because it fits exactly into the distinction that I was just talking about. Well, the governance part, it's really all the same thing, whether it's an environmental issue that presents a risk to your business or a social issue that presents a risk to your business, or a governance issue. So do you have the right structure set up internally to actually understand and manage these risks, right? How are you considering these, all the way up to the board and things like that? So regardless of which angle, it's almost an articulation of, the things that we're used to considering from a financial perspective. We need to make sure we're looking at other potential risks that could impact the business performance and then provide that information to investors.
So I think risk is going to be a big part of your answer here, but what is the primary motivation for financial players to be so concerned about ESG?
Yeah, absolutely. It's when it comes to the investment community, right? Investment is about managing risk. And so ESG is just another lens of risk that can give them the information they need to make decisions. But if I then kind of parlay back to our conversation on sustainability, there are kind of the much broader considerations about sustainability and where you'd want to dive into that. So for us as a business, certainly customers are asking for it more and more. We've got major influencers in our markets that are looking for example, more aggressive climate action. And our employees, there's just so much importance behind ensuring that we understand where our employees are at on sustainability and what they're looking for, for us all to be successful. So, we kind of embrace all of that, but on the investment side, definitely starts with risk.
Is there any part of this that is truly, for lack of a better term, kind of green? That is to say, motivated by, look, I want to do right with the world regardless, or less so from a risk perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really, again, where we kind of start our sustainability strategy, because we do see sustainability, from the business perspective, providing solutions that allow the world to better manage the climate crisis, to better decarbonize as an enabler of our success, right? We see those trends. We see where folks are looking clearly for low embodied carbon materials, right? And so if we're not tracking that and we're behind the curve, then, we're likely going to underperform. So it is strongly connected between, sort of doing right, understanding where those trends are hitting your market at the right time, and then acting upon them. One of the things that we like to say is, and this is, straight from our Chief Technology Sustainability Officer, Alexa Dembeck, that we have to learn faster than the market is changing. And, we'll often talk about this decade as being the exponential decade. If you look at how quickly things are going to have to change when it comes to decarbonization, again, back to the climate side specifically, there's just a lot of change that you'd rather be in front of than behind if you're going to be successful as a business.
Do you get, I imagine you get some resistance in the sense of, should we trust you? Is there any sense that, people are like, you're going to need to show me that you really mean this?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think certainly one of the ways that we do that is it starts with our overall purpose of a company, which is to empower the world with the essential innovations to thrive, which sounds like a great little throwaway line. But we said, if we do that right, we are actually having the positive impacts that we want. And, you can imagine if you are an innovator, right, you're a technical guru, nothing fires you up more in the morning than to know you're coming to work to make a difference. And so that is sort of the core of what we try to do. And then the trick that you might be sort of highlighting is, I can think of a million different ideas of projects we could commission to go solve sustainability problems. A fraction of those will actually be things that we can do to make money today. And, and maybe there's something that we could do 5 years from now, but today's not yet the right time, right, to make money. Ultimately, we are a business. All businesses have to be successful, right? So some of the trick becomes understanding when those trends are getting so strong that the opportunity is real. But absolutely, as important as purpose has become to ensuring employee motivation and overall business success, like that's where it starts for us. Okay.
Alan, I've heard that ESG is either a really big part of the investment world or an absolutely massive part of the investment world. Things like $400 billion or even $6 trillion. Is there any sense of the size of ESG investing?
That's a great question. I don't have any hard numbers for you other than what I've seen from folks like the leader of BlackRock Capital, right? A large managed fund. He's put a number out there in his CEO letter to CEOs, and he's put a number of like 4 trillion. So I think whether it's 4 or 6, it's a lot of money chasing sustainable investment. And he's gone so far as to say it's going to be, the next big thing, right? Bigger than digital, bigger than the social media and search engine, eras that we've gone through. And so I think the money is clearly whether it's a push or a pull, I'm not sure, but it's clearly influencing companies and how they approach this area. Your question was a good one. I was thinking about with Shawn, why should we trust you? There's an element of both doing it, as Shawn said, because the timing is right. You can make money at it. There's an opportunity. It's the right thing to do. There's also an element of, there's governmental policy that's pushing you in this area as well. And we've certainly see that in our business. We have any number of innovations that are both, we're doing it because it's the right thing. There's opportunity. We can differentiate ourselves, as well as, quite frankly, we're getting pushed a little bit. And so then you have to optimize and maximize that as well.
So both a push and a pull. You think that's necessary to keep the growth, keep the momentum going?
I'm interested to hear what Shawn says. My personal opinion is yes. I think you need both of those. I think at some point the opportunity becomes then big enough that it is self-sustaining. Companies will do it because they see the opportunity there.
You start to talk about some really big questions, like fundamentally, how do we navigate the transitions that are needed to be a zero carbon society, right? What does that roadmap look like from here to when we look back in 2050? How will we have gotten there? And certainly the push, the pull, the dynamics that it really constrain what a business can do and can't do, right? How do we massage those to ensure that we're moving fast enough in the right pace? There is a little bit, so you do have, of course, the push, you have the pull. You have to have good crystal ball and confidence in, okay, I know this is where things are going. And so one thing that I'd point out is, just this year we've had just some really great climate discussions, at the executive level on climate. And, we realized that our climate ambition was not aggressive enough. And so that actually led us to make a commitment to increase our greenhouse gas reductions goal in line with the science needed to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees C, which is like the big target that everybody is shooting for under Paris. We're not yet on track for that. So we made that commitment. I can't tell you we know yet exactly how we're going to get all the way there, right?
Yeah.
But we know that that's undoubtedly, again, back to as fast as the market is changing, we know we'll need to do that, right, to be successful.
You mentioned that a minute ago that ESG is almost like the next tech, or at least the leader of BlackRock mentioned something along those lines. Do you mean that ESG is sort of a driver of new growth, new jobs? Is it something where we'll, be actually generating new and different jobs to add to the economy through ESG?
I might be a little controversial and say, from the perspective of ESG being transparency and disclosure, right? That may be creating some jobs around folks who need to do some more reporting than we used to do. Right? But really, that's where when you look at sustainable innovation, when you look at needing to learn faster than the market is growing, and how things are changing, we do believe that the value creation structures are being changed as a result of sustainability. Right, sort of the fundamental driver that's allowing, or that's making folks more interested in your ESG disclosures. But yes, there's value creation. And so, if you look at, and I know this is one of Alan's favorite topics, but, just decarbonization of buildings and what that means for electrification. You can think that the value creation opportunity that's required to, produce a successful building, a successful home, a couple of years down the road might be different than it is today.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I did mean that. I meant jobs like in solar, geothermal, carbon capture, things like that. You're right, though. If you create, it might create a few more jobs of people keeping track of things. That's not necessarily what we want, though.
Hey, Dean, another element here, another thought I had around your question of how big this is. Shawn and I were at a meeting over the summer with a number of large the public builders, and 6 or so of them in the room. I'm going to say more than half, maybe 4 to 5 of those folks were had either the additional responsibility for ESG, sustainability, or were new to the company specifically for the purpose of driving sustainable efforts in those companies. So that was quite a change for I'm not sure, Shawn, we were really expecting that. And it was so it's a positive thing. I have not looked at the other, whatever there's 18 or 20 public companies, how many have, sustainable officers or have that role. But we were pleasantly surprised at that. Wow. Okay. So, residential had always had a bit of the reputation of maybe you're lagging commercial, right? Commercial has some architects are driving it, maybe some progressive folks there are driving it, and residential was a bit lagging. We saw that and thought, okay, well, maybe it's the public, maybe it's the Wall Street money that is going to be an impetus here, is going to a catalyst for residential to kind of move forward and catch up, or at least move forward in a way that they haven't recently.
I'm going to ask you a really hard question, so I have to ask it because that's what I like to do, just to make you guys squirm a little bit. But do you think that in terms of its net impact, is ESG a net positive on the economy generally, or is it kind of neutral, or even some people might say it's a drag? What's your sense of that?
I'll kind of pick up on where Alan just left off in terms of what we saw at that summit this year, because again, that summit was one of the areas where we realized, or we actually kind of brought that point of, hey guys, remember ESG and sustainability are kind of two really different things. Within that group, where what we thought we were seeing was, things like the climate SEC potential rules that are out there, right? Driving more focus from some firms to just really look at their ESG reporting and start to issue their first ESG reports, for example. Even though that might be about disclosure and transparency, that was leading to conversations around, well, how do we decarbonize? And hey, what is our leadership opportunity? And do we really understand if we take this action or that action, which one's going to move us forward the fastest, right? That's far beyond just let's disclose some risk. That's how do we think about action? How do we think about solutions? So from that perspective, I do see, we've got some anecdotal evidence that ESG is leading to kind of that broader solutions-based thinking.
Let's talk a little bit more about housing then, specifically housing. How does ESG impact? Is it things like, I mean, sustainability has an impact on the housing sector, but is it also things like, waste disposal and building materials? What are some of the ways that ESG does impact specifically housing and building?
Yeah, I think it's all of that. And Shawn can certainly weigh in. He has a ton of experience in the analysis of this. So he probably I'm sure he thinks of areas that I'm not thinking of. I tend to think of the impact on the building envelope. That's when I think around, energy efficiency and sustainability and the things we need to do to decarbonize. And obviously that's where our products play. So that's, not self-serving, but it's certainly myopic, right? That's what I'm thinking about. And so in my mind, to meet many of these goals and to be able to, offer up a more sustainable world, we have to improve our building envelopes. And again, whether it's air, certainly have to manage water, because as you tighten up building envelopes, as you add insulation to them, all of that contributes to reducing the drying capacity of the wall. And so if the wall gets wet, it takes even longer to dry because you have less airflow, you have less heat energy. So what that means, so it puts a premium on water management, and then you have to tighten it up because to take advantage of these other technologies like heat pumps and so forth, they don't necessarily perform like a fossil fuel furnace, and they're not going to heat the house up as fast, for instance. And so if you have a poor performing building envelope, you're going to be very disappointed in what you perceive to be the performance of your heat pump. And it has nothing to do with the heat pump. It has to do with the building envelope. So in my mind, I tend to go there first, just one, it's kind of my job and to think about that stuff. But certainly those other areas, chemicals of concern and recyclability and so forth, are also areas that folks are interested in too.
Yeah, if I kind of start with our overall business sustainability strategy, it's to partner with our customers and the industry to drive the total carbon of buildings to zero, to advance circularity in the industry, and to use green chemistry, safer by design solutions to enable the industry. And so Alan, I love the way that Alan thinks about how important the building envelope is in managing decarbonization and our climate goals. Because as we know, and we love to say, if you look at all the greenhouse gas emissions globally, about 40% of them actually come from buildings. Something like 11% related to the materials themselves, and the rest due to operating the building, running your HVAC, those sorts of things, electricity, all of that. And so it's really important to to keep the climate approach from a decarbonization and electrification part in mind, just based on the role that the industry plays in that particular issue. But if you look at the other sustainability dimensions, right, you look at the circular economy movement, right? If you think about waste is a human concept, right? There's no waste in nature. So, how do we get better at that, just in our material economy? And we're seeing a lot of increasing demand for products that have more recycled content. And, how do we also use our building science knowledge and our innovation capabilities to take waste out of the value chain, right? Maybe we're selling a countertop and, that material is being modified and there's waste in the value chain. So, what do you do with that stuff? And then at the end of life, ultimately, how do you bring everything back? I've loved this concept that I think started in Europe around buildings as a material bank. We do have finite material resources. So shouldn't buildings just be like a store of materials that we use while they're building and then we reuse them again later? So, some idealistic cradle to cradle sort of things, but ultimately, those aspects of climate, circularity, and chemicals certainly drive a lot of the demand and the discussions that we have.
Let me ask my question from a minute ago, but specific to housing. That is, is there a neutral impact or even a positive impact on the economy? Let's ask that specific to housing, because let's be honest, you can see a lot of the builders can go, oh, you're costing me money, having to worry about waste disposal, et cetera. Do you get a lot of that? Or do you see ESG's impact on housing specifically as being at least neutral?
I see. So I'm not sure I'm answering it exactly, but if the question is, am I going to have to pay more for these sustainable features, performance, I like to think of it. I would suggest maybe the question is, am I willing to pay for that value that's delivered? And so, in other words, we all live in homes that are better than they were 100 years ago. We're paying a lot more for them. We've made that decision that we're willing to pay that for those extra features and benefits. Same in the car industry, right? We're paying more for cars today than we did 30 years ago. And we have more advanced systems in them, better comfort, better performance. You can go 7,000 miles between oil changes now. And we're willing to pay for that. So, maybe there's some reason, if there's resistance, it's because the folks don't recognize the value that might be there. So I think if you can demonstrate the value that's there, I think there's more than ample opportunity to make that sale, if you will. And, certainly some builders are on the cutting edge of that, right? There's some small, innovative, really green focused builders out there. Some of the large public builders now, as we mentioned, are focused on ESG and are getting driven to it from Wall Street and money that they're looking at. That's going to drive them there. And so I think other builders are going to have to, and then you have government policies driving energy efficiency. And so if I'm a builder, and I'm in the middle here, not quite sure what to make of it. The world's changing around me. I think you have to get there's so much inertia. I think you're going to have to pick your head up, look around, and figure out where you want to play here. I think they're going to have to, because, and Shawn touched on it earlier, not only is the market, their potential consumers, homeowners moving that way, but their employees. Shawn runs a monthly meeting that, no offense to my other colleagues and the rest of our business, but it is a great meeting. It's focused on sustainability. He has great attendance. He makes it fun. There is so much energy on that call because folks really want to make a difference here. So if I'm a builder, a smaller builder in a local market, the folks I'm hiring, they want to make a difference too and feel like in their job. So I think there's this, I would not underestimate the impact that the employees have on driving this as well.
That's interesting. I don't really think about, I think about what you said a minute ago about buyers though. Do you get the sense that buyers are pushing the home builders, whether they like it or not, to kind of follow these policies? The home buyers.
The home buyers. I in some respects it's expected, right? Like nobody expects to buy a home with windows that leak air. Like they just don't. Oh, you mean I got to pay more money for a better window? Like that's a really delicate conversation. To have. I have them in my house. My windows are horrible in my house. I wish the builder had put a little more money into them.
Well, you're the glass guy. How is that possible?
Exactly.
Come on.
Right. Right. So, that's a tough conversation to have. I think it's kind of expected. That's why I think the market's going to move the builders. If you're a buyer, a potential buyer, and you're going to look at a home and there are big builders doing this now. There's a couple of them come to mind that market themselves, as kind of an energy. It's almost like a miles per gallon thing, right? They're so many dollars per month in savings or cost. Well, that's going to get your attention. So, and anymore, we know the biggest builders are continuing to increase their share of closings of the market. So I just think it's driving in that direction. If you're a smaller, generally smaller builder building in a single market or two, you're going to have to make a move here and figure out how you're going to build over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, Meritage comes to mind, one of the biggest home builders in the country, and they've been focusing on that efficiency for a long time. And they do exactly what you said. They advertise it very successfully too.
They do.
By the way,
yeah.
Let's talk about.
I would just say, just to be fair to KB is another one. They got into it very early, right? They market that. Beazer Homes is making a huge move towards net zero energy by 2025. They put a stake in the ground, announced it in their annual report, that they're going to be net zero. So this net zero, drive it's coming. We're in the early stages of it, but it is definitely coming.
Yeah, there are just so many increasingly sustainability focused builders. I think some of these aspirations are as aggressive, as ambitious as what we've seen in the commercial market. Just in terms of their drive and what they're trying to achieve. And we look at that and say, okay, great, our vision's aligned. Well, how can we help you, right? You want to achieve this type of HERS rating. Well, how can we help you get there?
Okay. Yeah, it has become just an absolute, again, more and more, it's going to be the absolute norm. If you don't do it, you better, as opposed to hey, we do more than anyone else does. Let's talk about some of the pushback, though. So California had its decision. They made a policy that they're going to have all cars will have to be electric sold in California, I think by 2035, if I remember that correctly. There's been barely a peep about, there hasn't been that kind of a reaction, at least not yet. But there has been to ESG, there has been a movement in some states to sort of hit back against ESG. Does that concern you? Do you see that being a major impediment to ESG going forward?
I think any major transition goes through, its ups and its downs, and getting everybody aligned on a single thing is, always impossible. But I think I keep coming back to climate just because it's so central to our industry. Recent Climate Week discussions in New York, and as we look to COP27 this year, the longer that the world stays off track to manage the worst impacts of climate, the more the pressure will increase. And so, you're kind of either reading that crystal ball or you're not. But that's certainly the basis for our strategy. And so, if that's sort of a fundamental trend for where you're going, then the rest just kind of follows to it. And, there will be the folks that you want to collaborate with and who need your help to enable their goals, as we were talking about, and, other folks who might not pay attention. But, when we think about sustainability and ESG, absolutely an enabler of our overall success as a business. And in some sense, you might say why we've got sustainability and innovation paired in Alexa Dembeck's role, right? I mean, the two are just so fundamentally linked as an overall business success enabler.
Yeah. It has made for some strange antagonisms, though, because these are, like you said, BlackRock. These are huge international investment vehicles, and they're under threat by some of these states for doing what they want to do, which they think is in the best interest of their investors. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. It might be like you say, it's so big, the momentum's there. It's a falling snowball, whatever the dumb metaphor is. It's, you can push back, but it's not going to work.
That's where I'm at, Dean.
Yeah.
Sorry, Shawn. Yeah.
No, you're good. It will be really interesting to see, again, how these SEC climate disclosure rules evolve and are adopted. In parallel, I know one of the questions, there's certainly an alphabet soup of sustainability. There's an alphabet soup of ESG. And the reporting frameworks and, the TCFDs, the SASBs, all that stuff. There's the work that was launched last year around the ISSB, which was at the International Sustainability Standards Board, to harmonize ESG frameworks. Yeah. Right. So their goal is to get everybody speaking the same language when it comes to ESG, because we're not there yet. And that was kind
of my next question, Shawn, is that we had Tesla kind of punished for the government's part of them. They're clearly with electric cars. They're on the good side of the other parts of the ESG. It seems to be some other groups didn't sort of downgrade them. Is that going to harmonize? Is that going to sing from the same hymnal eventually?
Yeah. The Tesla example is fantastic, and Elon Musk doing what he does. I think for folks that might not be as familiar, basically it was the S&P 500 Sustainability Index. Tesla was booted out, and some other companies were allowed in. And the response was, well, hey, if we're doing so much good to help drive climate action in the mobility sector, how is ESG any good? I think he called it a scam or something like that. So some very lively tweets and memes, and Elon doing what he does best.
Elon often doesn't help himself on those things. He should get his fingers away from the keyboard once in a while.
Right. But at the heart of the issue, though, was kind of where we started, that ESG is not about rewarding companies inherently for doing awesome sustainability things. Mm-hmm. It's about putting information in investors' hands, right? And so, some of those companies just had more robust disclosures than Tesla. So, that's the way the system is kind of set up right now.
Okay. There is a little bit of a disparateness to ESG. Not all of those things fit perfectly and neatly together. And so that, especially the G part, I feel like is a little bit not separate, but a little bit different from the E and the S part, the environmental and social. Let me ask two more questions. One is, going back to consumers, I mean, investors are interested in ESG because it does best by their investors, right? And investment folks want to give the best return on their dollar, and they think ESG policies will get there because it lessens risk, et cetera. What about consumers? Should consumers care about ESG and be interested in furthering ESG from a consumer standpoint?
Yeah, maybe Alan, I'll start. I think as an inhabitant of this planet, you have to care. If you look at what's going on right now, the impacts from the climate crisis we're already seeing, the droughts, the wildfires, the heat waves, the increased storm intensities, right? The fact that Pakistan was like a third underwater from recent flooding, and they're still it's going to take forever to recover. Just insane things that are going on. As that continues to happen, and as we go from 8 billion to 11 billion people on the planet, like, we're not going to be happy if we don't figure that out, if we figure out a way to manage that. So that's kind of on the, just good human side of things. But on the consumer, looking at your pocketbook impact, think about the increasing supply chain disruptions that might happen, right? The increasing cost pressures, and just how impacted the economy could continue to get based on these sorts of events that would continue to happen. So, I think from both the good human and the pocketbook perspective, there are some good incentives to want to care about things like ESG.
I hope you're right. I think you're right.
We are a science-based company, so for us, DuPont, there's no question.
There's a lot of folks who aren't science-based or even anything else. Let me ask you one last thing. I think it's probably best for Alan. Can you give us a peek? What might, and Shawn too, actually, what might be happening next from DuPont along the lines of ESG, whether it's sustainability or what have you? Anything kind of a future little sneak peek?
Well, certainly the focus on, reducing carbonization, right? Lowering carbonization. And so whether that's through new products, we often, whether it's through new products, new solutions, meaning, some application innovations, maybe with existing products, maybe in the area of fire, could be an area of interest for us. Again, we think about products a lot. We also think about application solutions. And so there's a fair bit of innovation that goes in there. How do you keep water out of increasingly complex designs of buildings or roofs? Think about how complex roof lines have gotten over the last 20, 30 years. How do you keep water out? How do you keep air out? How do you make all these materials work together? It continues to be a challenge with what architects want to design and what folks want to live in. And so I think, continuing to decarbonize will be a focus for us. And that has, impact, whether it's in the products we sell or in the operation of the buildings. It could be that a particular product isn't necessarily any less carbon than another product, but its performance over the next 50 to 75 years, makes a huge difference. And as Shawn mentioned, that's where we think the big levers are there in the operational side, at least in residential, but there's opportunity everywhere.
Yeah. Shawn, anything else?
Yeah, well, I know that one projection is that Alan's going to have the most sustainability robust marketing plan for 2023 that we've ever seen.
Okay.
But beyond that, I think Alan really.
That sounds like some inside base. That sounds like a little internal stuff going on.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? And really to all of our marketing leaders in the business and across the company. But no, I think Alan hit it. It's really more efficient buildings that use low embodied carbon materials as we increasingly decarbonize and electrify to get there. So what I'd say is, we just had some really great success with products that have been winning sustainability awards. And, if we look at things like our low GWP froth pack spray foam insulation, that reduced the blowing agent global warming potential by over 99%. Our innovative styrofoam that reduced the embodied carbon by 93%. We've got Alan, I think, mentioned the Thermax NH product earlier, our non-halogen Class A polyiso board that is a finalist for a sustainability award. And, hopefully we'll see where that goes in October. But, we've got a track record of really bringing out some great sustainable innovations. And we've got just a whole bunch more in the pipeline that, we'll be super excited to share with folks as we go. But yeah, just more of the same. We've got, again, this climate strategy. We've got goals focused specifically on climate circularity and chemicals. And I just can't wait to share the things that we'll be doing when we bring those out.
Yeah, and I would also add that obviously none of this is done in a vacuum, right? So to the extent that we can collaborate with others, your listeners, whoever might be out there, it's going to take all of us to make an impact in this area, and it's not necessarily going to be only a scientist in the lab creating a new material, right, new solution. And because we're at the early stage of this, there's so much to learn, and I think we all have to learn together, and that's where we're at right now. As Shawn mentioned, we're trying to learn faster than the market's changing, and we're getting up that learning curve, and we think we're doing a good job, but we can always collaborate with others and partner with others to bring these solutions to the forefront.
Well, I'm glad you're doing it. Go ahead. Shawn, go ahead.
Alan, I think that comment is just so important because, be it a big sustainability challenge, we know that nobody can solve any of the stuff on their own. But, for us, we've been very intentional this year about trying to engage in sustainability conversations with our customers, our partners, our influencers. Because at the end of the day, it's really just about knowing where things are going and knowing where we can really help our folks who are looking, our customers who are looking for us to help them. So we've had a number of conversations, I can only see those really sustainability focused conversations continuing to increase and expand and inform our strategies. And kind of back to the marketing plan comment for Alan, right? Part of his job is to help synthesize all that stuff together and figure out what we should go do. And for me, that's where a lot of the exciting magic happens. So yes, much more collaborative type energy that we need to harvest.
Alan, you're on watch.
I am always.
Okay.
That's right.
I am glad both of you guys are doing what you're doing. I'm glad DuPont is doing what it's doing. And I'm sure this is happening on lots of companies across the world, but this is good. I hope we see sustained ESG in the future. Alan and Shawn, thank you guys so much for coming on. I love doing these episodes that aren't exactly just perfectly, kind of a little bit of a round peg in a square hole, but they're fun. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Great. Thank you, Dean.
Absolutely pleasure, Dean.
Thank you, guys. This is Dean Worley for the New Home Insights podcast. We will see you in a couple of weeks.